How's it going, everyone? How you doing? Welcome back to the Elite Battle League channel. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a post-season roundup, the first of its kind. Much like the preseason roundup, we are going to be joined by a co-host here, so I can have someone else to bounce off of, because I don't feel like sitting here going through all 16 teams alone. My voice is going to be destroyed after that. But I did want someone else to piggyback off of, and of course, I am joined by Lionheart Plays yet again. How are you doing, good sir?
We are well. How are you doing?
Oh, amazing.
Good. I bet.
Yeah. The obviously Lionheart was one of the coaches from this season, as was I. Our links are down below alongside all the other coaches that were a part of this season in the Elite Battle League. So please go check them all out. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the Elite Battle League channel so you can see more content in the future. I believe we're going to be doing stuff for the upcoming little tournament we're going to have in the off season, which I don't think we've officially announced. But I believe we're going to have content for that. So we're not going to be gone the whole off season like previously. But yeah, so check out all the good stuff. Subscribe to the Elite Battle League channel. I'm sorry there were no roundups throughout the playoffs. I had no time. I was focused on other things, obviously. So to quickly explain how we're gonna work this postseason roundup is we are doing a final postseason power rankings. So the way we're gonna do this is we're gonna go from the 16th place in the rankings all the way to number 1. We're just gonna talk about each team's season. We're not really trying to go in depth about what a coach did wrong or whatever. We're just going over the season, going over how their season went, and all that good stuff, and why we put them where we put them. Which this is also I guess kind of a test for a format we might use next season. So yeah, that might be a change too. But with all that being said, let's get right into it. At number 16, we have the Raging Lake, coach of the Greater Manchester Greninjas. Unfortunately, they did end their season 0-5, their debut season 0-5. However, their schedule was not the kindest in the world. They had to take on the 4-season veteran Game Reviews in the week 1. Then they had the Montebello Morpico, who obviously pulled off a perfect regular season. We'll get to them later, of course. They had to take them on. Then they had to take on the reigning champions in Fort Sill. Then they had to take on one of the finalists in San Antonio. And then they had to take on DC as well. So that was not an easy schedule to begin with. And the fact that Lake actually progressively started to put in more of a fight in these matches was good to see, because he got swept the first 3 weeks, which obviously we don't want to see that. So it was good that he was able to turn around in week 4 and 5 and actually put up a bit more of a fight. Week 4 was basically a sweep anyways, but he put up a little more of a fight, and then week 5 he actually put up a really good fight against DC, his best showing of the season. So his strength of schedule was insane. That was not an easy schedule, especially knowing how a lot of his opponents ended the season. 4 of them made the playoffs. 3 of them made the playoffs. And they obviously, like I said, he had to face the reigning champion and one of the finalists, and then a team that went 5-0 in the regular season. So it was not an easy schedule, and it's unfortunate that that's the schedule he was dealt with on his debut season. But I did like the improvements I saw as the season went on. How'd you feel about the Raging Lake season here?
So very much like what you said. Sadly, the schedules that they had was just unforgiving. I do love the fact that towards the end, right in the middle, towards the end, they started to improve and everything. And just much like you said, their best showing was against the DC Starmies, which we know how fierce of a battler Timmy is, and for him to put up, a fight as the fight that he put up during that battle was, it says a lot. But yeah, his schedule was just unforgiving. So very much everything what you said, man.
Yeah, hopefully we can see some improvements. I don't think his team also was fully trained at any point during this season. So hopefully, honestly, if he doesn't have time and that's just how he wants to come to the battles, I do not fault him at all. So by all means, I am curious with a couple of his matches, had his Pokemon been fully trained, how they might have gone. But, you know, it is what it is. Like I said, if Lake doesn't want to put in the work, well, that sounds bad. If he doesn't want to train his Pokemon like all the way, that's fine. It's really not. It's not even required. It's not a rule or anything. So he's more than welcome. Maybe he doesn't have the time, whatever it may be. Again, I don't blame him. But, you know, like we said, the schedule was just very, that was the perfect word actually that you said, unforgiving. It was very unforgiving. So it's unfortunate he got dealt a really bad hand on his debut season, and you know, sometimes that's the way the cookie crumbles. So hopefully we get to see some improvements. I think next season. I think Lake's supposed to come back next season, so hopefully we'll see some big improvements there. Yeah. But moving on, coming in at number 15, we have Nate Tube, coach of the Walton Wingles, who also unfortunately did not get a win this season. But Nate definitely showed leaps of improvement. I mean, just a bunch of improvement this season. He got himself, it sucked watching a couple of his matches because he was getting himself into positions where he could win, he could pull off the win. Particularly, I believe in weeks 2 and 3 was where he put himself in a really good position to win, and then he just, I don't know if it's an overconfidence thing or he just lost focus, or it was just a couple of decisions where he just unfortunately was not able to pull off a win. Like I said, particularly in weeks 2 and 3 where he had Florida and Carolina. He had to begin the season with me, which, not toot my own horn, but, you know, being the champion, that's obviously not a great way to start the season. And again, weeks 2 and 3 against Florida and Carolina respectively, he put up a really good fight and honestly maybe should have won those matches. And then weeks 4 and 5 were not particularly close because he had to go against some really tough battlers. 2 of the semifinalists, actually. Actually, he faced 3 of the top 4, one of which being the champion. So that's a, talk about a rough schedule. That's a rough schedule. And again, it was really unfortunate that he couldn't really pull off weeks 2 and 3. We've talked about it before, how he can be a little rigid with his game plans. He has one game plan, and once it goes out the window, he tends to struggle to adjust. So but at the same time, again, we saw a lot of improvement from Nate this season, from what, you know, compared to his previous seasons. I don't really count his first one. I think last season I count more because his first season was not really fair. He came in with a team that wasn't his. But definitely showed a lot of improvements from Nate this season. And this, again, despite the record, I think he actually did put up a good fight and got himself into scenarios where he could have won a couple matches. It's just he couldn't really close it out. But how'd you feel about Nate's second full season?
Oh, that's right. This is his second full season, isn't it? Because his debut was him being a sub, I think, for someone. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
But no, you're, again, very much echoing what you said. I think this is definitely his best season by far, albeit a couple of kinks and whatnot, which I'm sure he's figuring out and everything. But, yeah, I mean, just echoing what you said. Best season by far. His team wasn't even that bad. It could have done some work and everything, you know. I honestly think with every season that he's been in, he just keeps getting better and better. And who knows, next season could be different. You know, you never know.
Yeah, I definitely think his legend pick with Guzzlord was not fantastic. Yeah. But I don't really. We both agree that we don't really rate Guzzlord too highly. But at the same time, it wasn't that bad. He did get sniped a lot, if I remember correctly from his preseason interview. He said he got sniped a lot and had to readjust. So that's clearly not a team he was prepared to use, and yet he still put up a pretty good fight throughout the season. So, you know, you might question a couple of picks, but again, he got sniped a lot. So, unfortunate, but he still put up a fight, at least. He still put up a fight. So, unfortunate that he wasn't able to get his first win in the EBL, but still, we're seeing improvements on improvements on improvements. And this is the closest he got to a win this season. So, was this season. So, I'm hoping to continue to see the improvements next season. Moving on, at number 14, we have the Iowa Incineroar, coached by Inferno Man. They finished the regular season 1-4. The obvious asterisk on the season being that Landon served a penalty only being able to bring 4 Pokemon in every single one of his matches, and yet still managed to get a win against DC of all teams, which was quite impressive. And he did put up relatively like a pretty decent fight in most of his matches. Against Iowa, against Iowa, against Carolina was definitely his best showing aside from the win all season. You know, in the other 4 matches, there may be a couple different decisions would have led to a closer match. You could say the same thing about when he played TJ as well. Maybe a couple different decisions. He gets back into that. Our match, the match between myself and Landon, I just don't think he brought the best possible team to face me. I'm not sure how the prep went there. I'm not sure, what it was, but I didn't think that team he brought was well equipped for my team. Maybe he was just trying to get some Pokemon out the way. I'm not sure. And then obviously beating DC in week 4. And then unfortunately he did have San Antonio in week 5, but and that match did not go well because of Blaziken, who heated up quite literally at the end of the season. But still, Landon, there's a reason that we both decided to put him at 14, because he still put in a really good showing. Despite only having 4 Pokemon, he still managed to get a win. I don't think anyone really expected too much out of Iowa this season, but yet he still put up a fight almost every single week, and managed to get a win with only 4 Pokemon. So I thought that was pretty impressive. I thought that was warranted enough to put Landon up at 14. And yeah, what did you think about Landon's season here?
Yeah, so I think his most impressive win is definitely, like you said, against DC of all teams, who had a pretty insane team as it is. Only 4 Pokemon, he managed to pull out his win. That was pretty good. I've always said that Landon's team was very formidable. That situation that his team was in is unfortunate, but imagine if that team would have just won round. It's something. He did. I think he did good despite everything. To be honest, I really think he did good.
I agree.
I really
considering the situation.
I really think he did good, because he was able to adapt as best as he could, and he was still able to pull out. It's not like he. It's not like he got tossed around or anything. He stood. He held his own. He did his thing, and he put pressure on his opponents, despite the record. I like what Landon did despite the record, and kudos to his win. Applauding his win. I've always did. But that's all I really have to say on his team.
Yeah. So we're on the same page there. He put on a good showing, despite only being able to use 4 Pokemon, and it really wasn't as bad as I think maybe some people thought it would be. He still managed to put up a fight and put in some good work throughout the season. So good job. That's why we put him at 14 above 2 other people. Moving on, at number 13, we have Mike the Quick, who is the coach of the Florida Rowlets. They finished the regular season with a 2-3 record. Started off, I don't want to say they started 2-0, but both of those matches were incredibly close. And frankly, I'm not trying to take the wins away from Mike, but honestly, his opponents kind of threw a little bit late in the match. Couple of decisions from Pidge, couple of decisions from Nate, and they both take those wins from Mike. Talked about Nate earlier. Obviously, week 2 was when Nate and Mike faced off, and honestly, Nate had a win condition there. He didn't really take it well enough. And then Pidge as well had a way to win that match. And also RNG was not on his side either. But I will give credit where credit's due with Mike, and he did beat the finalists from the previous season, and a former champion. So you can't really take that away from him. He still did win that match, and he started the season 2-0. He started the season hot momentum-wise, and then he went against San Antonio, and that's when things kind of started to fall apart. It's unfortunate. Both of his wins were incredibly close, and all 3 of his losses just were not really that close. I think the closest of his 3 losses was against Jakey, if I'm remembering correctly, but even that one wasn't too kind to him. I think did San Antonio sweep him or come close to sweeping him? I don't remember. I don't remember either, but I know it was a very dominant match, and then obviously I was able to pull off the reverse sweep against him as well. And then again, Jakey's match was closer, but still not really that close. So it's unfortunate the way his season started was good. Obviously going 2-0 against two tough opponents, and then he just tapered off as the season went on and really couldn't put up too much of a fight in the last 3 weeks. It is what it is. His team really wasn't bad. I think one of the major problems he had was that his team is very physical, very physical.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at him, you look at a majority of his team, very physically oriented. So one reflect in that team is just struggling to get hits off or defense boost, whatever it was. That team was struggling to really get a lot of hits off. I think I was able to do something like that against him. So that definitely hurt him. Also, I believe basically his Pokemon builds did not change throughout the season either. And again, say the same thing about Lake. It's ultimately up to the coach how they want to handle it. But that did lead to an incredible lack of unpredictability. I was able to use that against him. If you guys watch my match against him, where Zeraora was completely locked against my Rodriguez. So that did definitely hurt him, but it sucked to see because he had such a nice start to the season, close matches, close wins, but he pulled out the nail biters, and then he just, unfortunately, his opponents just were able to take advantage of his team in the final 3 weeks. I think everyone was able to adjust by that point, and the surprise factor was kind of gone because a lot of newcomers get that sort of surprise factor because no one really knows how they play and all that good stuff. But I think that wore off by the time week 3 came around, and unfortunately he wasn't really able to get any momentum back. What do you think about Mike's season?
Well, yep, we're not muted. So yeah, again, there's not much for me to disagree on with you there. Actually, pretty much echoing what you said. He started pretty dominantly. Well, actually, I wouldn't say dominantly, but he started with momentum and everything. He had his wins. He had his personal MVP, that carried him and whatnot. I do believe that in his season, RNG definitely played a factor in his victories. That definitely catapulted him during the beginning portions of the season. And sadly, that did fizzle out. And, well, he has the record that he has today. Again, yeah, there were just a couple of things that were stopping him, from being the best that he could be, because his team was actually pretty good, I think, in my opinion. His team was actually pretty good. Very physical based, but even then, I think he could still make work with it. I think, had there had been, different changes and everything, things could have been differently. Could have gone differently here and there, but regardless, overall, we'll wait to see how Mike does in future seasons for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way you can tell how his season went is he had a 2-3 record, but a -13 KD. That kind of goes to show that how close those first 2 wins were and how not so close the last 3 matches for him were. But that happens. We've seen it before. We've seen a team start hot 2-0 and then they just
drop.
Teams just adjust, and then they just drop the last 3 matches. We've seen it happen before. This is not new, but it's unfortunate that it happened that way because close matches do tend to teach you quite a bit. And then he ran into a really bad matchup, in my opinion, against San Antonio, and then just kind of lost momentum there, and teams started to really understand Mike's team more, and that did not play well into his favor, obviously. So it's unfortunate that that's how his season ended, but regardless, there were definitely sparks there, and I agree. Can't wait to see what his team looks like next season, and how he's able to perform. Moving on, though, we have number 12, Newt, coach of the Carolina Garchomps. They ended their season 2-3. I believe their season was a bit of a roller coaster, actually, if I remember correctly. So the week 1 was against Iowa. Very close match on a 6-4, I believe, if I remember correctly. It was surprisingly close. That's when we got to see Landon's first showing with the handicap, and he actually put up a really good fight against Newt. which was not a good sign for Newt. And then week 2 was definitely not a good sign for Newt because he got swept by San Antonio. And then he managed to pull out a nail biter against Walton. Again, Walton probably should have won that match, but you know, it is what it is. So he starts off the season 2-1, and then went against Montebello, who was able to exploit Carolina's big weaknesses, which I'll touch on in a second, because TJ was able to exploit that same weakness. All 3 teams that beat him exploited the big weaknesses that Carolina had, and that was their type disadvantage. They were very weak to ground types, and they were very weak to dragon types. That's why TJ and that's why San Antonio in particular did incredibly well, was because they both had dragon ground types. And then Montebello, of course, swept Carolina as well because of that dragon type weakness. Montebello having 2 dragon type legendaries. And I think Reshiram also had earth power or whatever. So there was that big glaring weakness really hurt Carolina. I think a lot of Carolina's shortcomings can be boiled down to the team. I don't think the team was particularly great. I don't even think we noticed in the preseason roundup how bad his weaknesses were, in terms of the type disadvantages that he had. And ultimately it showed in all 3 of his losses, how bad it was. Nate came close to being able to exploit it, and he kind of did. Again, a couple decisions made differently in that match, a couple things go differently his way. That match might have ended differently, but for the most part, I think honestly a lot of Newt's shortcomings were because of the team composition, and the glaring type weaknesses that it had. And his opponents were able to exploit that. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is, I guess. What did you think about Newt's season here?
Newt's was definitely interesting. Newt's was definitely interesting. You know, a lot of things happening on the back end as well, making it difficult to view certain matches and whatnot. But I think just touching base on the team alone, you are very much correct. You know, a couple of unorthodox picks here and there. I know that he surprised everybody when he drafted the Pikachu. And we were all interested to see, you know, the Pikachu, you know, the Pikachu. I think the only other time that we've had an unorthodox draft pick was, I guess, season 1 was Shuckle with me, and that turned out really well. And then season 2 with Ace drafting a Meowth, and that also actually turned out pretty well. And so I didn't knock the Pikachu pick because of how well Shuckle and Meowth did. So I'm like, I'm interested in seeing how this works, but I still couldn't do anything, and you know, couldn't think much as to what he could do with the Pikachu. Kind of to where we were wondering. I'm sure he knows that we can't do items, right? No light ball. Yeah. But sadly, we weren't able to see whatever plan he had in store with the Pikachu. Much like you said, his opponents were able to exploit very, very big weaknesses, and that led to where the Carolina Garchomps are right now.
Yeah, I get Humberto did kind of mention it, and I'll say it as well. We didn't get to watch any of Newt's point of views, so some of the decisions that we maybe were questioning, we never really got to get his reasoning. We never got to hear his reasoning, rather. So I guess that is something to also mention. Maybe there's some reasons why he drafted certain Pokemon that we just never got to hear, which does suck. But we'll mention that again. We never got to see his point of view. So who knows? Maybe there were reasons why he drafted certain Pokemon. But again, those big type weaknesses ultimately came back to bite him, and he wasn't really able to put up much of a fight against certain opponents in all 3 of his losses. Really, I think it was like a combined 18 to like 3 scoreline or something like that. 18-4, something like that. It was not pretty. It was not pretty, which was unfortunate, you know. But it is what it is. Sometimes you don't realize how your team composition can come back to bite you, and that's ultimately what happened. But I'm curious to see how Newt will approach next season. I believe he's supposed to come back. So I'm curious to see how he'll approach next season and his team composition. We'll see if he takes an unorthodox pick like Pikachu again, We'll see if she wants to try that again. Because Pikachu didn't do anything this season. I don't even think it got a move off. That poor thing.
I think it was mainly for the Ash hats. Because it was kind of cute seeing the little thing on the field with this little hat cut to the side and whatnot. That was kind of cute.
Maybe he thought opponents wouldn't want to kill it.
Oh no, I ain't got no heart. If I had faced him, I wouldn't have a heart. Goodbye.
But yeah, we got Newt in at number 12. So moving on, we have number 11. We have Lionheart Plays, coach of the Fort Sill Warriors, the reigning champions who didn't make the playoffs. What's up with that, man?
Bro,
just kidding. They ended their regular season 2-3, and as I just joked, unfortunately did not qualify for the playoffs. Their season though was not super easy. You want to talk about strength of schedule? They had it. They definitely had it. They had to take on Snowdonian, who actually we're gonna get on in a couple spots here. But they obviously had a pretty good season, despite the record. Texas, who came out swinging against Fort Sill. And then they had Manchester, so a bit of a cool down match. But then they had a rematch, the championship match, and then New York, one of the semifinalists. Or they ended the season with 2 of the semifinalists. So not an easy schedule. And also the team was not bad, but something that we've talked about before is that the team, I don't know what it was, the cohesion, the way they worked together, something about the team just didn't really click 100%. So that obviously didn't help this season either. And the match just getting thrown off guard by Texas, I think Humberto would agree in that it kind of shook his mental a little bit throughout the rest of the season. Even though he was able to rebound heavy against Manchester, the last 2 matches were obviously very difficult. So it was always going to be difficult to win with his schedule. And later when we found out how his team was kind of struggling to mesh well together, it made it all the more difficult to try and retain that title. So unfortunate that we didn't get to see the champion in the playoffs again. But you know, what's one bad season against 4? But let's hear from the man himself. How did you feel about your season here?
So you're right. You know, again, because surprise, I'm echoing most of what you're saying here. Just a couple of little bits here, though. I still believe that the team was good. I don't care. I like the team. I think my problem was aside from Texas, which of course that definitely came out unexpected and whatnot. You know, I think I was I wouldn't say desperate, but I was really wanting to pull out a strat, and I was favoring certain Pokemon in the team throughout the majority of the season. And then I'm like, you know what, screw it. And the only real change I did, to be honest, was week 5, and that's just because it made sense to not bring it, and so that was probably the biggest change of the season that I've had the team go through. But by that time, we were just honestly ready to just check out. Like, we wanted to, and then as soon as it started, I'm like, you know what, energy just went away, and I'm like, yeah. But no, you're right. It was interesting because, you know, we did start everything to win and everything, and then week 2 was definitely the hardest for me because it was the first time in years that something like that happened, and I'm like, oh well, gosh darn, you know, well, gosh darn, but yeah. It is what it is. You know, you have to get your butt beat in order to learn. And this season definitely taught me a couple of things. So, onward and upward. That's really it.
Onward and upward.
And like you said too, you know, what's really one bad season compared to the 4 dominant ones that we've had, and the records that we've set, not to toot my own horn or anything, but there's that.
But that is the Fort Sill Warriors coming in at number 11. Next up, we have Game Reviews coach of the Detroit Luxuryz coming in at number 10. They ended their season 2-3, and this is, I actually forgot to mention this. So from 16 to 11 are teams who didn't make the playoffs at all, meaning they didn't even qualify for the play-in match. 10 and 9 are the teams that lost in the play-in match. 8 through 5 were teams that lost in the quarterfinals. 4 and 3 were semifinals, and the top 2 are the 2 finalists. So this was a bit segmented, so I guess you can kind of see how it's going to go. But regardless, coming in at number 10, we have the Game Reviews coach of the Detroit Luxuryz, who lost in the play-in match. They ended their regular season 2-3. I will say it was an interesting season for Max. He swept, got swept. I'm just saying it how it is. He swept, got swept, had a really interesting match against Jakey, who didn't really play too well in that match. I didn't really like how Jakey played in week 3, but Max was able to fully capitalize on it regardless. And then he had TJ, and then ended the season with Montebello. So it was a little, he ended with a couple losses at the end of the season. It was a weird season for Max. It was a weird season because he had his moments where he looked good. He looked like the Max that had continued to improve. Because for those of you who might not know, who might not have watched the first 4 seasons, Max's first 2 seasons were not amazing. His next 2 seasons, though, he showed a lot of improvement, a ton of improvement actually. Like, his incline was insane. And then this season was kind of a weird roller coaster all over the place. I mean, you can kind of maybe chalk it up to the team. I don't even think his team was that bad though. He did wheel spins, but it was Pokemon he had before, and I know we keep making fun of it. Last one, I promise. But he still ended up with a good team regardless. So his season was kind of weird with how he was playing. His performances, again, he started the season with the most ridiculous roller coaster. He swept and then got swept. It was just weird how it started. So we didn't really know what to expect from him going into week 3 because he had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in his first 2 weeks. And then he came out and did what he did against Snowdonian. Again, although Jakey didn't play particularly well in that match, Max fully took advantage of everything Jakey was doing. So that was a great showing from him. And then against TJ, it was a little up and down. And against Montebello, also kind of the same thing because I think Montebello got up to like a 5-1 lead at one point, or 5-2 lead, something like that, 4-1 lead. And were able to just kind of maneuver and control the end of the match. So it was weird to see from Max. And then obviously the team he got swept by in week 2 was the DC Starmies, and unfortunately he had to rematch them in the play-in match, and I just don't think that team matchup was good for him at all. So that was unfortunate that had to be his play-in match. And I believe it was 6-1 or 6-2. I think it was 6-1 because Haxorus was able to do a lot of work, and then I think it was Mammoth Swine that came in and finished the match. So it was really unfortunate that was his play match. It was against a team that had a really good matchup against him. He had to face them twice. But you know, it is what it is. Again, Max's season was a little weird with how he was playing. I don't know what you can chalk it up to, the team, what it was. Not really sure, but it was definitely an interesting season from Detroit. A bit of a departure from what we kind of got used to in seasons 3 and 4. So it was weird. It was weird to see. How did you feel about Detroit season?
Surprise, surprise. Here's me agreeing with you again. And for the record, just want to make sure that I was laughing when we mentioned Max being, sweeping and then being swept, because I remember in our Discord server, one of the weeks where most of the sweeps happened, I think it was week 2. There was something in the water that week, bro. Yeah. There was something in the water that week that we had like 4 teams get swept. But I remember somebody said in the chat, no, hey, when the matches come up, nobody look at my match. And then I'm like, yeah, ditto. And then Max is like, yep, same here. I don't know. It was just fun. It was just funny to me the way we just put it up in the chat. So that memory sparked that laughter for me. So I wasn't laughing at Max. It was just laughing at that memory. But just echoing what you said, Max has been a powerhouse the last couple of seasons. Like you said, his first 2 seasons were not the best. Seasons 3 and 4, absolute powerhouse. And he's made it far as the league goes and everything. I'm actually very, proud and happy with how far Max has gone. Although, again, this season was definitely a strange one. But even for it being a strange one for him, he was still able to pull off some work and whatnot. And you got to give that credit to him. I think Max did great where he needed, and he did his best where certain situations happened. That's really much that I'm able to say on that. I think Max is a great battler. I believe he is still coming in on the next season, so we'll see how that season goes. But I mean, there's nothing much more that I can say with this, other than that, we can't wait to see how he performs next season. And unlike the host here for the show, I'm not gonna knock you on the wheel spins. That's all.
Thanks. To be fair, you take away his total record was 2-4. You take away the 2 losses against Timmy, because again, that was just a really bad team matchup. He goes 2-2, which is not bad at all. He put up a fight in all his 4 matches, aside from the ones with Timmy. It was just team matchup was not in his favor. It kind of made him look bad, I guess, but it's just the way the teams matched up. It wasn't nice for him. Because Mewtwo soloed his whole team, and so Timmy found out a way to hurt his team really bad for Mewtwo later in the play-in match, which Mewtwo wasn't even necessary. It is what it is. That again, you take away the matches against Timmy, it's 2-2, and he put up a fight in all 4 of those matches. So it really wasn't a bad season from him. It was just a little strange here and there, especially the way it started. But that's number 10. Coming in at number 9, we have Jakey XY, coach of the Snowdonian Frostmoths, who very similarly had a 2-3 record, and also went out in the play-in match to the Texas Tyranitar, which was a very surprising result the way that one ended. We'll get to that in a second. But Jakey's season did not start too hot record-wise. He started the season 0-3, but we mentioned this in the preseason roundup. His schedule was not kind in the beginning. He had to take on the reigning champ right away. Then he had to take on New York, who eventually ended up as one of the semifinalists and the number 2 seed in his conference. And then week 3, he had to take on a veteran in Max, who we just talked about. Not an easy start to his season, and it was unfortunate because I was really hoping he'd maybe pull off one. We kind of talked about it, that if he just pulled off one of those wins, his last 2 matches were a little more favorable team-wise. And that's kind of what happened. He unfortunately, again, started the season 0-3, but was able to pull it back, win his last 2 matches, and qualify for the play-in match, I believe, in 4th place. Like, he hopped, I think in the last couple weeks, he hopped from like 7th to 4th, which was impressive, especially considering his last 2 wins were impressive. His win over Florida and his win over Texas especially was really nice. And his win over Florida was really nice. He ended the season strong, but he honestly put up a fight in pretty much all 5 of his matches, all 5 of his regular season matches. Again, I did not particularly like the way he played against Detroit in week 3. It was not his best showing. Against New York as well, there were a couple decisions maybe he could have made differently, but against Fort Sill, I mean, that was a really close match. Weeks 2 and 3 were he put up a fight, but it wasn't super close. And then obviously again, week 4 and 5, he had a fantastic showing in those 2 wins. And then Texas figured out what to do against Jakey. Again, it was a surprising result. I believe it was 6-1. That Texas, how Texas won that match. That was a surprising result. I didn't expect it to be that one-sided. So credit to Alan, and that one we'll get to him in a second here. So Jakey's season, he definitely had really good. He had a good showing. He had a good debut season, regardless of the record, regardless of how it started. I thought he had a really good season, debut season. He showed what he can do. Maybe a couple of different team members would have benefited him, but ultimately, I think he had a really good debut season. He showed a lot of flashes of success, and I believe he's coming back next season. So I'm very, very curious to see the improvements he makes, because he already had a lot of good stuff going for him this season. So I'm curious to see how much better he can really get. But yeah, how'd you feel about Jakey's season here?
Well, see, I actually liked his season overall, despite the records. I've always said that Jakey played real ballsy with the matches week 1. Every single match that he's done, he set out with a goal in mind, right? The preseason interviews, everyone chose him as the most underrated team, or a lot of people did, right? His goal was to show that he wasn't a pushover, that he wasn't underrated, and he succeeded. He put in work. I think that his most amazing accomplishment, or his best accomplishment, was his first matchup against Texas. He just dominated that match entirely, played extremely well with the strats and everything. I'm a fan. I really enjoyed how Jakey played this season. Despite records on some, I see the intent and his thought process behind some of his choices. So I can't really say, oh, you could have done this better or not, because his theories were sound. And ultimately he was just like, screw it. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. And that's what I like, because a lot of battlers, myself especially this season, tend to overthink things, and he just didn't. He just did, and he played well. So that's all I have to say on Jakey. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, some of his decisions did bite him. Again, I'll bring up that week 3 because he did a ton of switching, which ultimately.
Oh yeah. That one. That one.
But
I agree.
The point still stands in that he was pulling the trigger. He was going.
I agree with you. No. That absolutely makes sense. Unnecessary switches, means unnecessary damage to Pokemon and whatnot. Milling teams is one thing, but doing it constantly like that is another. But regardless, I just like how he played overall.
Yeah, definitely. Again, Jakey put in a really good showing this season. Curious to see what he does next season. Moving on, we have his opponent from the play-in match. We have the doorman coach of the Texas Tyranitar, who ended their regular season 2-3, and ended the postseason rather with a 1-1 record. They went out in the quarterfinals after they beat Snowdonia in the play-in match. They lost to San Antonio in the quarterfinals. We'll get to that in a second here. Texas's season started really well. I mean, really well. They beat an eventual semifinalist in New York in their week 1, and then swept the reigning champions Fort Sill in week 2 in a match that kind of surprised everyone. And then I don't know what happened after that, because the match against Montebello, you can argue Allen probably should have won. Definitely, if there was more time, he would have won for sure. I think he didn't take advantage of Carlos's mistakes enough in that match, and it ultimately came back to bite him later on. So that was a tough pill to swallow, I bet. And then week 4 was against myself. That was not a very close match, and then his match against Jakey also was not very close. So we kind of talked about Mike's season earlier. Allen had a similar season in that he won his first 2 weeks. Except the difference being that Allen's first 2 weeks were a lot more convincing than Mike's first 2 weeks. But the next 3 losses, I don't know, maybe it was that match against Montebello that kind of messed with his mentality, maybe. I'm not really sure. Because Allen's team was pretty darn good. It was a scary team. It was very good. I think one of his bigger questionable decisions, I would say, is maybe it's because it was against me, so that's why I'm saying it. But he didn't bring Grimmsnarl against me, which I didn't think was a very good decision in his part, because it was really one of the only things that could check a sweep with Zacian or Ganondorf, and he didn't bring it, so that ultimately costed him. I don't remember I'm not gonna lie, I do not remember his reasoning for bringing the Pokemon he brought, but you know, there were a couple decisions made especially in his last couple weeks that weren't great. But regardless, again, he got off to a really hot start to the season. Probably should have beat Montebello. Had a couple things gone differently. And then his playing match was very convincing over Jakey. A match that we weren't really expecting either. I mean, he put in a really good showing as Jakey. We expected that match to be a lot closer than week 5. And it turns out just the pendulum swung the complete other way as Texas just dominated Snowdonian and knocked them out. But then they ran into San Antonio. Obviously, that's when San Antonio's Blaziken quite literally started heating up, and it was able to 6-0 sweep Texas. That was really unfortunate to see Allen go out that way, but the lead was just, as I think Sly's video was titled that too, the lead was perfect. And it was able to handle Texas really, really well. So that was an unfortunate way to end the season, but regardless, I think there was a lot of good from this season from Texas. This is maybe one of their better seasons that they performed. You can make an argument last season because they did make the semifinal. However, their regular season obviously was not great. I think this time around their regular season was good, at least for the first 3 weeks, and then obviously the playing match was really, really good as well. So I don't know if it was a mentality thing that hurt him in weeks 4 and 5 or what it might have been, but I think Texas did a lot of good this season, and I think Allen can take a lot from this season. Despite the way it ended, it was obviously not ideal, but I think there's still a lot that he can take from this season. Yeah. So what'd you think about Allen's season here?
It's the curse. I'm just messing.
The
curse. Excuse me. Yeah, this is definitely his best season to date, I feel. This is definitely his best team that he's drafted to date, and everything. I think it was just unlucky week 3. Week 3 is definitely where it started to go down, to where we know how everything ended up until the play-in match against Jakey, and then we thought okay, great, he's got his sting back, he's got his sting back, and let's see how he does for the playoffs. Maybe he's gonna dominate again. Maybe he just needed the fall once and then to come back. Sadly that didn't happen, but I have every confidence that I think every season that he's been in, his logic and his thinking gets better and better. And this season was a testament to that. So I'm very excited for next season to see how he does and who he chooses.
Yeah, definitely. His team selection this season was good, and kind of reminds me of Max in that the improvements were definitely there. It kind of started in the playoffs last season, and then he picked up right where he left off pretty much to start this season. So I agree. I'm very curious to see how he improves as the seasons go on. But that is number 8. Moving on to number 7. These are the quarterfinalists who did not move on from the quarterfinals, I guess. Oh, wait, no. That started with Allen. This is the second quarterfinalist. At number 7, we have Moosh, coach of the TJ Dropouts. They ended their season 3-2. And were bounced in the quarterfinals in their first playoff match of the Elite Battle League, and probably their last. TJ's season was interesting. They started with a really lackluster performance in week 1, where Smoosh didn't really do a whole lot against San Antonio. You can argue if maybe he pulled the trigger a little more, he probably could have won that match. It was a 3-2 timer match, so obviously no one was moving too much in that one. But you could argue if he had pulled the trigger a little more, he maybe could have done some more work in that match. But it is what it is. But he narrowly lost in week 1, was able to pull off a big win against Iowa in week 2, lost to Pidge in week 3 in a pretty convincing fashion, and then was able to beat Detroit in a fairly convincing fashion in week 4, and then beat Newt in week 5. Like I mentioned earlier, Newt's type weakness again was on show there as well because of TJ's Garchomp. Smoosh had really good showings in all 3 of his wins. All 3 of his wins were pretty convincing. All 3 of them he put up a really good fight. and had a really good game plan, came out, did what he had to do, and walked away with pretty convincing wins. But then flip it on the other side, all three of his losses were pretty lackluster performances from him. Kind of. Against San Antonio, again, he didn't really pull the trigger enough. I feel like Colchester was not close. His match against Colchester was not very close. Zamazenta was able to go huge late in that match and secure the win for Colchester in that one. And then against New York, he definitely had momentum at certain points. But ultimately, he kind of just played into Maxis's hands at the end, especially. I think there were some decisions maybe he could have made differently in that match, if I'm remembering correctly, where he could have swung momentum a lot earlier in his favor, but he didn't really do that. He did, but he didn't. Ultimately, the decisions he made that kind of gave him momentum kind of bit him later on. So that was unfortunate there. So his losses were interesting because he had one where he was very passive, one where he kind of got control the entire time, and one where it was very close and he did pull the trigger at certain points, but at the same time, there were definitely some different decisions he could have made throughout that match. But then on the flip side, all three of his wins were pretty damn impressive. They were all fairly convincing. So it was an interesting season from Smoosh. You want to talk about a roller coaster season? That was definitely it. His was kind of all over the place. How'd you feel about the Smoosh's season here?
So we like to make fun of Smoosh and whatnot, joke around with him and whatnot. And I know that he's had his little banters with me, and I'll be like, oh, you ain't nothing. You can't do anything as far as battling goes and whatnot. But I think that as a battler, people don't realize Smoosh can actually battle. Okay? Granted, I'm not saying that he has, you know, that his plays were the most amazing and everything, because as you pointed out, there were flaws that had happened, you know, in some of his losses and whatnot. I think that I agree with you that his match with Maxis, I think, had momentum in certain parts. I think that he did well to push that match as close as he did. Ultimately, some things did bite him, but I think that Smoosh, with enough training and discipline, Smoosh could definitely be more of a force to be reckoned with. I mean, that's really much that's really all that I can say with Smoosh. I mean, I think that he took everybody by surprise with how well he did, you know, with his record and everything. That's really it for me. I'm actually pretty impressed.
His season did kind of go under the radar a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because it was Smoosh, but his season was really not bad. And yeah, I agree. I think he impressed me as well. Like, he actually put in a good season, put in a good debut season. And unfortunately just bowed out to an opponent who had a better game plan, I think.
Yeah.
So it really wasn't a bad season. He just it came down to the wire. I mean, it was a good season. There's really not much else that can be said there. He put in a good shift. So that's Smoosh at number 7. Next up at number 6, we have It's Really Timmy B, coach of the DC Starmies. They ended their regular season 2 and 3 and managed to make it to the quarterfinals after winning in the play-in match against Detroit, as we mentioned earlier. DC, I think, had a season that was a little disappointing because of the team they had and because of how Timmy played last season. I think maybe he fell just a bit short of expectations, but at the same time, he still actually did quite well. His 2 wins were one of his wins was against a team that hadn't won a match in the regular season, or didn't win a match in the regular season, and his other 2 wins were against Max, who we mentioned before had an incredibly tough matchup team wise. So his losses, though, some of them were really close. I mean, you look at his match against Montebello, If he brought Shadow Sneak on the Marshadow, he would have won that match.
Yep.
You look at his match against New York, very close as well. I think the Super Luck crit coming in clutch for Togekiss, I believe that was that match. Was when the first crit is really all that mattered with the Togekiss. That hurt DC, so there was RNG right there. And then their match against Iowa, where they just kind of got outplayed. Honestly, that was a tough one. I think that was a tough pill to swallow there, because that was a match that, as we mentioned before, Landon's team is no joke. It was still good. But DC probably should still be winning that match, considering how strong their team is as well. So that was probably a tough pill to swallow for Timmy, but he was able to get into the playing match with a late push there, especially with that win against Manchester. Closer than we would have expected, but regardless, he still put up that win in week 5. And then he had Detroit again. We've said it again and again, an extremely favorable matchup. He was able to win against DC, and then he was able to win against Detroit rather, and then he had to take on me and put up a really, really good fight. Again, another case where if he brought Shadow Sneak, he would have won that match too. But it is what it is. But he put up a really good match against me. And much like Smoosh, he went out kind of with a bang in a way. Despite losing, he did really, really well in that quarterfinal match. And all of his wins were really dominant too, by the way, like for the most part. Against Lake, I think a lot of it against Lake was that the two of them were just kind of going. Like they were just shooting. They were both just going. Yeah. So I think that's why that match was a little closer than we would have expected. Which is weird, because at the same time, that is DC's sort of bread and butter, is the offensive pressure kind of style. That is usually DC's sort of play style, is very offensive. So it's weird that he kind of struggled in that match to get a foothold, and it wasn't until like middle of the match when Mewtwo came out is when the match basically ended there. But it was weird that he didn't really, he couldn't really control the match for a bit. But it is what it is. Like I said, he didn't do bad. It was a very close match against Montebello, a very close match against New York, a close loss against Iowa, and then a very, very close match against LA. In all of his losses, like they were all very close. I think he lost by a combined total of -6 total across all of his losses, which is really not that bad across four matches. That's not bad at all. So it was very clear that he was putting up a fight. Again, I think considering the team he had, it was maybe a little bit below expectation. I think there were quite a few teams that were holding DC kind of up to a higher level because of the team they had. So it is unfortunate that he went 2-3 in the regular season, but he still managed to make the quarterfinals and still managed to put up a really good fight. What did you think about DC's season here?
I agree with very much of what you said. Excuse me. I agree with very much of what you said. Timmy's style is the aggressive type and I think that he still was pretty formidable. Everything that you said just holds true. Again, also do want to point out, if that's okay, that his Mewtwo also got the season MVP. So
yes,
that's something.
Yes, it did.
That is something. So that's still a pretty good feat in and of itself. So
you're welcome, League, for introducing Mewtwo. Because I believe Humberto's Mewtwo also was incredibly close to getting that season MVP as well.
Despite how bad we did too.
It was in the top 5 race right there. So Mewtwo,
I think it was second.
I think it,
if I'm not mistaken, right?
Second or third, like something like that. I think Mewtwo now, by the way, holds the most regular season kills ever in the EBL.
Did it beat
Cinderace? It beat Cinderace. Cinderace had it, and Mewtwo already has surpassed it.
Wow.
Which is insane how quick that happened. Because I think I can't remember how much Cinderace has, but I think Mewtwo now has like 20 something regular guys. That is regular season kills. We're not even counting playoffs. That is regular season. That's insane. But yeah, Mewtwo is definitely a force to be reckoned with, and deservedly is on the logo. But yeah, DC season again, nothing really to be ashamed of. And Timmy definitely is still a battler to be reckoned with, especially considering the teams he's been drafting. Both of his teams have been really good. So if he continues to get good teams on his side, he should be able to do a lot of work in future seasons in the EBL. But that is number 6. Moving on to number 5, we have Mr. Toast, coach of the Montebello Morpico. They completed the one of 4 perfect regular seasons. 3 of which, by the way, happened this season. Carlos was one of them. But this season was not, despite the record, it was the perfect season, but not really perfect play out of Montebello. There was definitely a slew of mistakes throughout the season. A lot of big mistakes that his opponents never really capitalized on until he got to the playoffs. That's when he finally met an opponent who fully capitalized on his mistakes. His schedule wasn't the worst in the league. He had to start with DC, which was rough, but then he had Manchester, then he had Texas, which was tough as well, and then he had San Antonio. Oh, sorry, not San Antonio. Misread that. And then he had Carolina, which again, he had a really good team matchup there, and then Detroit, which ultimately proved to be a pretty one-sided match in that one. So his 2 closest matches, weeks 1 and 3, were against DC and Texas respectively, and I think that's where a lot of his mistakes really showed. It is a testament to Carlos. You can also flip it as a positive in that he made a lot of mistakes, but he was still able to win matches, which is still impressive. So there's definitely room for improvement there. Again, he made quite a few mistakes this season. You could argue he maybe made more big mistakes than he made big plays, but again, that's a testament to how well he really did, because he was still able to win matches. He was still able to recover from his mistakes, turn around and win matches. Again, I don't think many of his opponents really capitalized on his mistakes in the regular season, and he was able to walk away with the 5-0 record. And then he met his match. And then he met the Colchester Celtics and their coach Poke Pidge in the quarterfinals. And Pidge was able to fully take advantage of every mistake Carlos made. Pidge took full advantage, and it was still close, 6-4, which you got to respect Carlos for putting up a good enough fight against Pidge in that sense. But he finally met someone who was able to take advantage of his mistakes and was able to keep momentum throughout majority of the match and ultimately pull off the win against Carlos. So it is unfortunate that he, in his first playoff match after having a perfect regular season, he couldn't get a win. But Pidge definitely deserved to walk away with a win in that one. And again, he met his match. So there was definitely, the crazy part is Carlos's improvement in the preseason. I'll give you guys a little insight. When we were doing practice battles and stuff, it was pretty drastic. Like, he picked it up quick. His main problem was remembering stuff about Pokemon, like the types, the moves, what they do and that stuff. But his sort of acumen of when to switch and when to do this and when to do that was actually there throughout our practice matches. He was giving us, the 2 of us, a tough time when we were giving him practice battles in the preseason. So he definitely picked it up quick, and again, a lot of his problems came down to remembering what certain things do and what types Pokemon are and all that stuff. So and it showed. He went against someone who had a ton of knowledge, who's a former champ and 2-time finalist for a reason. And Pidge is, obviously, we're going to talk about him in a second here. His late season form is legendary. So it is also unfortunate that he had to face Pidge at that point. But, yeah, Carlos had really good flashes, but he also had some flashes of things there's definitely room for improvement. Weird roller coaster season despite the 5-0 record. How do you feel about Carlos's debut season here?
Ditto. I'm messing.
Cool.
Anyway, so like you said, his preseason training regimen was pretty intensive. Like you mentioned, he gave the 2 of us, our runs and everything. So he had certain problems here and there, which were obviously displayed through his matches. Of the players that won their perfect season records and everything, he was, it's pretty. I was impressed. I was impressed with how well he did. Like you said, it's just some wins were close, but still he was able to push it and win it. And then he met his match with Pidge, but even then he still held his own pretty well. I think he did great. If he did that great as a beginner, or and by that I mean like with with the mistakes that he did and whatnot, if he did that well, he could have gone further with more. He was really a force to be reckoned with this season. I'm very proud of him. I'm very impressed. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, he did well. He did well, I guess.
I guess.
But that's Mr. Toast at number 5. Moving on to number 4, we have the semifinalists here. Metamaxis is who we got at number 4, coach of the New York Metangs. Their regular season went 4-1, and then postseason record 1-1. Won in the quarterfinals and then lost in the semifinals. Most of New York's matches were all pretty damn close. All of them usually by about +1, +2. I think there were only a couple matches. His sweep, and then I think his match against Jakey where it was more than that. I don't remember. I think I'm remembering that correctly. So that goes to show the sort of tactical level that New York is at. You could make arguments about the momentum shifts and stuff within those matches, and why they were so close. But at the end of the day, he walked away with the win, so it didn't really matter. He lost in week 1 against Texas, and then turned around and won 5 straight, 4 regular season matches, and then his quarterfinal match. Again, most of those, well, like the majority of those were really close, and then he had his sweep against Walton, and then his fairly dominant performance over Snowdonian were the 2 highlights. The rest of his matches, I believe it was against DC was 6-5, against U was 6-5, and I think against TJ was also 6-5. So he had 3 6-5 matches, very, very close, very, very close wins. And then ultimately against San Antonio, I mean, you could make the argument that at the end he kind of shot himself in the foot. I believe it was because he switched out Kartana, I think was what it was, or he switched out Togekiss. No, he switched out Togekiss in front of the Kyogre, and kind of shot himself in the foot with that decision. I kind of understood his logic as to why he did it, but ultimately keeping in Togekiss in that instance would have helped him a lot more. But that happens. It happens to the best of us. You make a crucial mistake at the worst possible time. Trust me, I know how that feels. So that was unfortunate to see, but he did bow out to the finalists and a coach who had a perfect season, a perfect regular season. So it really wasn't that bad going out against San Antonio. But New York had a very good season to start, and showed a lot of incredible plays and all that good stuff. Again, a lot of close matches, but still at the end of the day, he was the one that walked away with the win. So that's really all that mattered. And then eventually bowed out to San Antonio there. In what was still a close match. I believe that one ended 6-4 or 6-5. I can't remember exactly which one, but still, it was a very close match for him to go out on. So New York definitely had a fantastic season. Curious to see how Maxis will approach the next season. Team composition, all that good stuff. But how did you feel about New York season?
I think my Google also has something to say because it just started talking. But
ghosts.
We out. But I agree. I agree again with much of what you said. Certain arguments can be made with certain matches. With how close they were as far as the momentum shifts and everything. The majority of the matches that he's had, like you said, were close. 6-5, 6-5, 6-5, and 2 very dominant ones. But again, it just shows, like you said, he was the one that walked off with the victors at the end of the day, and that's really all that matters, to be honest. It's talking again. But yeah, it's really all that matters. But there was one thing I wanted to say, and then this thing decided to talk. Oh, yeah. So it just shows the amount of preparation that he puts in, how he's able to make sure that his team members live a hit to be able to get off what he wants. Definitely played off to his benefit in some matches, in the majority of his matches, and in other matches maybe maybe it would have been best that it died or so. I don't know, but regardless, his preparation shows. His preparation shows. He's an expert. He's an expert. That's all I really can say. He's an expert.
Yeah, great debut season from New York. Nothing to be ashamed of.
No, he went to the semifinals. Definitely nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah, great showing. So, good job, Maxis. He came in at number 4. And coming in at number 3, we have Poke Pidge, coach of the Colchester Celtics. Now, these two are kind of a little bit interchangeable. You can make arguments for either one being at 3 or 4. We decided to put Pidge here because this is his 3rd straight season that he's made it to the semifinals. I know that's kind of not fair to Maxis considering this is his debut season, but at the end of the day, we are going off of EBL history, and Pidge has made it to 3 straight semifinals. So he's kind of become a competitor where if you want to win the championship, you got to go through Pidge. That's the sort of thing he's established ever since he joined the league. If you want to win the championship, you got to go through Pidge now. So he's a very tough opponent. And as we mentioned earlier, his late season pushes are legendary because he always starts the first 3 weeks a little slow, maybe gets 1 win, usually gets 1 win out of 3 weeks, but it's, he starts the first 3 weeks a little slow. But then his last 2 weeks and then playoff runs, he just turns up big time. He figures out his team. That's Pidge's final form. That is his favorite part of the season because he turns up and just starts to wreck shop.
His final form.
That's,
I like that.
It is his late season form. That's his final form. But Pidge started the season 1-2. He had to take on the Florida Rowlets in a match where he probably should have won a couple decisions. A couple different decisions, and if RNG was also on his side, definitely that also hurt him. He unfortunately was not able to pull out the win in that one against LA. Myself, it was not too close because once Lapras touched the field, it was basically another 1v4. And then he managed to get the win against TJ in a dominant fashion. One against Fort Sill, in a dominant fashion, and then one against Walton in a dominant fashion. So he went weeks through 3 through 5 with 3 dominant wins, and then headed into the playoffs, took out an opponent who had a perfect regular season, the number 2 seed. He took him out, and then went out in an incredibly dramatic fashion against myself. So Pidge again just put up another fantastic season. Couldn't quite make his 3rd straight final. Couldn't quite get to that point, but he went out in an incredibly dramatic fashion against me. That was awesome. But regardless, 3 straight semifinals, and again, Pidge has established himself as one of the coaches that you have to go through if you want to win the championship. Now it's sort of precedent where you have to go through Pidge if you want to win the championship. He made it to he won in his first season, made it to the final last season, made it to the semifinal here. Like, he's proving himself as a top all time in the EBL. His season was awesome, and again, that late form always is there for Pidge. He can rely on that no matter what. His first 2 weeks weren't, obviously didn't start the way he wanted to, but then he turned up big time after week 3, and went on a great run. So Pidge, just business as usual, really. Business as usual from Pidge, from the commissioner. How did you feel about your old rivals season here?
Just letting you know, Pidge is only going to happen once if I ever come back. But listen, real talk. The man is great. The man is a great battler. The man is a great tactician. He, like you said, he's one of the greats. He's one of the best. And it shows. It doesn't matter to me how slow he starts off his season or how fast. I know that eventually if he doesn't, imagine if he gains understanding of his team immediately right from the beginning of the season. Man has the potential to have the perfect season, and I think I think it's just a matter of time before he does. The man is formidable. having fought him 3 times already, and all 3 times, well, not this time, but not this time, but the other 2 times were pretty close. That man knows what he's doing. Like you said, if you want to win the championship, you got to go through him, and he's not easy at all. He's gonna make you work for it, and if you don't put in enough, you're gonna lose.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. It was, no offense. I think you did wonderfully in your last match with him. Sadly, for Pidge, he couldn't quite make the cut to go on further, to make it to the finals the way he usually does. But if there was ever a way to go out, that would be it.
Yeah, that would be it.
If there was ever a way to go out, that would be it. So I think Pidge had a great season. Kudos to you, my dude.
Yeah, that's 3 straight fantastic seasons. And again, 3 straight semifinal appearances as well. That's nothing to sniff at. Yeah. So that's Pidge at number 3. At number 2, we have Sly Guy, coach of the San Antonio Espers, the finalist of this season. The second competitor to have a perfect regular season, go 5-0. And then obviously he won in the quarterfinals, semifinals, and then went out in the championship match in another very, very close match, which we'll talk about, I think, more in a second. But you have what's in front of you, and I'm going to say this, and this isn't me trying to take it away from San Antonio, because they still did what they had to do. Their schedule was not incredibly strong, especially seeing how a lot of his opponents ended their seasons. However, he did what he had to do regardless. He convincingly won 4 out of 5 of his regular season matches. They were not very close. Against Iowa was not close. Against Manchester was not close. Against Florida was not close. And against Carolina was not close. The only one that was close was TJ. And other than that, again, weeks 2 through 5 were really dominant. His quarterfinal match was incredibly dominant. Obviously, he swept Texas. And in his semifinal match, he was able to outmaneuver New York and walk away with the win in that one. So his first 7 matches were all, I think, except for 2, were all very dominant. So even if you get in quote-unquote easy schedule, which I don't think it was easy necessarily, it was just easier than some of the other competitors, he still did what he had to do, and he did it in a convincing fashion. So I'm not taking it away from him, because he did what he had to do. We expected him to win a lot of these matches, and he did in convincing fashion. So you got to give him a lot of credit with that. His run to the finals was very impressive. I still don't think Zygarde is the best legendary. But he did put in, he did sweep against a team that was really weak to Dragon and Ground. But I think Kyogre was his biggest threat. But then Blaziken showed up, and Blaziken started wrecking shop at the end of the season and started doing a lot of work. A lot of work. I think it got freaking, 10 plus kills in the last 3-4 matches that he had before the final. So Blaziken was definitely a really, really, really amazing pick. I think he's probably the best Blaziken user that we've had so far. He did really well with that. I guess Zygarde did all right. I'm just messing. But regardless, San Antonio's season was really, really, really good. You give it 10 extra seconds, and he's probably the champion. So very fantastic debut season from San Antonio. I think Sly did really well, and he established himself already as a top battler in this league. So I'm curious to see how he'll hold that up next season. But what did you think about Sly's season here?
I agree. Again, not to take anything away, his schedule could have been. Well, his schedule wasn't as tough as the others, but what matters is, he did what he came in, he conquered, he did what he had to do, he won, and that's it. That's really all that matters. There's nothing else that can be said. I think that I will give Zygarde this, okay? I will give Zygarde this. Because I'm not a fan of Zygarde being, a good legendary like that, much like what you said. I will give Zygarde this. It has a good shiny.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it has a good shiny. But that's it. Sorry. No, Slight, you did really good. I'm messing around with you on the Zygarde. I had to jump in on that, but you did really well. You did really well, dude. There's nothing that can be said. You should be proud. You should be proud with how far you came in your debut season. It is incredibly hard to get as far as you did, and you made it. You made it. So you should be very proud. I know I'm very happy and impressed with what I saw.
Yeah, I think the only other competitor that really can compare with this season was Bob when he, went to the final in his debut season, season 3. But I think this tops that for sure. It was a great season. It was a phenomenal season. So good job, Sly. Again, I'm very curious to see how you'll hold that up next season. Not doubting your abilities, but I just want to see, how you'll look next season with maybe a different team. Who knows? I don't know what team you're planning on drafting. So I'm curious to see how you, what you'll bring next season. If you bring more of the same, which is what I expect. There's big expectations now for you from your debut season. So definitely gonna have some big shoes to fill, aka your own. But that is number 2 coming in at number 1.
And we're done, guys. Thank you guys so much
and
for watching.
Video over. We have myself, the coach of the LA Inferno, completing the first ever perfect season in the Elite Battle League, meaning perfect regular season and won the championship. I'll let you take the reins on this one because I feel like anything I say will be really biased.
I think that he cheated. He was definitely doing. I'm just messing. Listen, I've always said this from the very beginning. Okay, I've always said this from the very beginning. The guy's team was just insane. The man was the literal sword of the EBL. If we had shields and if we had shield walls and great walls, this man was the wall breaker. This dude, there was no such thing as a wall. He just destroyed and mowed everything down. And the thought process and the prep that he's done just augmented everything that his team could do. It took him to several new heights in the league. And look, not only did he make it the furthest he's ever made it, but look how he did it. It's one thing to not do well season 2, or let me not rephrase that. It's one thing to not win season 2. I believe season 4, same deal, but he came far. And now season 5, not only did he win the championship, but he did it perfectly. The man's battle prowess is there. I argue with him all the time. Well, not all the time, but I argue with him, and he just needs to see it how it is. The guy knows what he's doing, and it shows. And just why we have a champion here on the Iron Throne. That's really all I have to say. All right, go ahead, Mighty Sword, take it away.
To quickly go over my season, started off with Walton. That was a fairly dominant match. Walton obviously had a couple ways to get into that match. Didn't really take advantage, and I was able to walk away with winning that one. Against Colchester, Lapras again 1v forward because the second it touched the field, it never left. And then against Iowa was fairly dominant. Against Texas was fairly dominant, and then a reverse sweep against Florida. I don't know if the same can be said for San Antonio. Maybe I should check that before we did this, but for me, for my regular season, in none of my 5 matches did all 6 Pokemon touch the field. So that was a really good feeling to do that in the regular season. But then the playoffs came and things got a lot tougher. Obviously it was a 6-5 against DC again. If DC brings Shadow Sneak, probably wins that match. Against Colchester, if Pidge uses close combat instead of Crunch, I still could have possibly lived with the Naganadel, but there was a much higher chance that he would have killed. So that was big. and then against San Antonio, as we mentioned earlier, or as I mentioned earlier, if San Antonio had taken like 10 less seconds on one of their decisions, probably would have won that match as well. So playoffs definitely were incredibly tough. That could also come down to my prep. It was not fantastic in the playoffs, I will admit. But regardless, we were still able to walk away with the win and still able to do what we did. I'm very proud, very happy that this is how I can walk out in EBL. Hopefully I don't need to come back, because I told Paige I would come back for emergencies and that's it. So hopefully I don't have to. But if I don't come back, then this is obviously the best possible way to go out. And yeah, very happy to be number one. Feels good. It feels great. But that is it for our power rankings. To quickly go over them, we have the Raging Lake at 16, Nate Tube at 15, Infernoman at 14, Mike the Quick in Florida at 13, Newt and Carolina at 12, Lionheart and Fort Sill at 11, Game Reviews in Detroit at 10, Jakey and the Snowdonian Frostmouse at 9, the Doorman in Texas at 8, Smoosh and TJ at 7, Timmy and DC at 6, Mr. Toast and Montebello at 5, Maxis and the New York Matangs at 4, Pidge and Colchester at 3, Sly Guy and San Antonio at 2, and Lonely Hermit and LA at number 1. Baby. Now real quick, I know this video has gone on long enough, but there is this one little segment I wanted to do. I did this last season for the postseason roundup, or the championship roundup. Championship match ranking. So I want you guys down below, and I might put something at the beginning of the video since this video is going to be forever long, to tell you guys to put it in the comments down below. What is your guys' championship match ranking for all 5 seasons? I'm very curious to see your guys' rankings. Ours that we agreed on was number 5, season 3. Sorry, Pidge. Pidge versus Yeltnim, the season that the Essex Espions won the championship. Number 4, we had season 1, Guanaco Gaming versus Stone Family.
Who's
64.
that guy? Who's that guy?
Hey, formerly Guanaco Gaming. That one was just a very one-sided match. But at least there was action.
If y'all didn't know, I used to be Guanaco Gaming.
Yes,
Sorry, he's gone.
Probably should have covered that. Took him around back and shot him. Number 3, we have season 4. We have season 4, which is last season, the match between Lionheart Plays and Poke Pidge. Lionheart obviously claiming his 3rd trophy in that one. And then at number 2, we have season 2 between Guanaco Gaming and Always More Videos. A very close match that came down to the wire. And talking about a close match that came down to the wire, at number 1 we put season 5, this season's matchup. I promise it's not biased. I just thought this match was really, really awesome. And you can make an argument for season 2 being above season 5 as well. 1 and 2 to me, you can make an argument for one going either way. We just felt like maybe it's recency bias, and also because I won. And then we put season 5 at the top. But it was very close. Came down the timer, and again, 10 more seconds, and Sly probably wins that match. So it's a really, really close tactical match. And it was a really awesome showing. So at number 1, we have season 5. At number 2, we have season 2. At number 3, we have season 4. Number 4, we have season 1. And then at number 5, we have season 3. Let us know your guys' championship match rankings down below. And my God, we need to end this video. That's gonna be for this roundup. That's gonna be for the roundup for the final roundup for season 5. Again, I apologize for not doing the ones for the quarterfinals, semifinals, and technically the finals, I guess. Apologize, but I just didn't really have too much time. Had a lot of stuff going on, so I couldn't quite sit down and do the roundups. Apologies again for that, but regardless, this was also again a little bit of a test run for how the roundups might look next season, for season 6. So a little bit of a test drive. Let us know what you think and all that good stuff. And of course, check out all the coaches in the description. Go subscribe to all of them. Subscribe to the Elite Battle League channel so you do not miss any of the content that goes on here. Yeah, you got any final words for the people?
No, God, no. I'm just messing. I'm just messing. If you guys enjoyed the video, of course, hit the thumbs up, make it turn blue, and subscribe to the Elite Battle League channel and everyone else, like you said. Comment your favorite part of the video. If you don't have one, comment your favorite emoji. Well, you also have something else to comment on as well. Comment your favorite championship match, which one you like the best, and that's all I have to say.
Oh crap. Zashin is the season MVP, by the way.
Oh, okay. Zashin is the season MVP.
Yes, it'll be Zashin and Mewtwo on the logo next season.
Wait, season MVP
what?
or playoff MVP? I don't know.
Playoff MVP. Sorry, championship MVP. Playoff MVP. Whatever.
One of those.
Yes. So regardless, it is going to be on the logo again. The first Pokemon to ever be on the logo a second time. Is Mewtwo and Zashin, which might be a pair that we'll see again next season. Who knows? Because they've been flying lately offensively. But regardless, that is going to be the logo next season. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. I'm excited to work with those two Pokemon. But yeah, that the Zashin season playoff MVP, Mewtwo season MVP. They're gonna be on the logo next season. All that good stuff. But yeah, check out all the links in the description. Subscribe, do all that stuff. Thank you guys for watching. Appreciate all of you. We need to end this video. And of course, appreciate our social friends, family, everybody in all left, the people not only Hermit, line our plays, and the Elite Battle Leagues where it's at. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Adios.
Bye.